Once again, I just want to say welcome to today's EnRoute webinar. We appreciate you taking the time out of your day to spend it with us, learn a little bit more about EnRoute. Today's webinar, Aaron will be covering vectorizing in EnRoute. So he will show you everything he knows about vectorizing, and Aaron has been working with EnRoute for a very long time, and now he is in charge of all our training, and so he will be showing you the presentation on vectorizing, and then after that is over, we'll open it up for a question and answer session. So if you do have any questions for Aaron about vectorizing or just about anything in EnRoute, then go ahead and type those into the chat window, and he will answer as many of those questions as we can. And we will be recording today's webinar, so if you have to step out or if you'd like to watch this again later, we'll be recording it and uploading it to our YouTube channel, and we will send you a link to the recording as well. And I think that's everything, so we'll turn it over to Aaron.
All right, sounds good. Okay, so we kind of want to just briefly go over here, and this is kind of a topic that can be used in EnRoute here and kind of help with drawing files and whatnot. And kind of wanted to go over some of the basic things that you might run into using the tool, and then seeing some examples of how we can maybe use that in conjunction with some other tools in EnRoute. To hopefully get the drawing files that you need. So first of all, let's import a file. First thing you need to know about EnRoute is if you're going to vectorize an image, it does have to be in one of these two formats. So I just went to the File Import menu and I changed my filter to BMP. You can import a PDF, but the PDF has to be uh, vector only. It won't import any images inside of a PDF. So any image that you do bring in has to be in a .bmp or a .jpeg. Another tricky thing to make sure of is that if it says .jpeg, .jpeg, that's a slightly different format, and EnRoute won't see it. So just kind of take note of those few things there. So .bmp or .jpeg, and we can import a file here. So it's easy as that. We can import these files in. The tools in EnRoute for vectorizing will function very similarly to the ones in Flexi, except for the only caveat is that the vectorizer in EnRoute is mainly for black and white. Color images don't work that well. You can, it just it won't vectorize some of the colors, and so you might get some weird results. So if you do decide to bring something in, typically what I would like to do is I'll take an image maybe that does have color and either convert it to grayscale, or I might convert it to black and white, and that'll help sometimes with those files. Um, EnRoute does not do that in of itself because it's not really a bitmap editor, but you can use all kinds of different tools. Sometimes you can use Paint, especially if you get like an image off the internet. Windows Paint is really good for opening a file and then just resaving it as a different format. So if you download it in a PNG or something like that, you can always open it with Paint and then save it as a .jpeg or a .bmp. That works just great. So that's a tool that everybody will have in their Windows already pre-built. It's free, don't have to pay for it, and you can kind of use that sometimes to modify these files a little bit in case it's not quite the right format or something like that. Also, those types of little programs can also be helpful if you have an image like this that has a lot of crazy artifacting right along in here, like we see. Sometimes, if in this particular file, it's not going to be a problem, but if the file has artifacting really bad, then you may need to go into like a program like Paint or something and maybe reduce the contrast or something like that to kind of help alleviate some of that. But for the most part, you can see that this file is not the greatest and it's got some artifacting, but you'll see that when we go to vectorize, which is just under the draw menu, I'm going to click Vectorize Bitmap. We're going to get this screen right here. By default, settings are going to be as follows. So this is going to be, and this will be turned off. So by default, you'll see these settings. You've got 3 different options. And these are, if you've ever used Flexi before, these are very similar to Flexi. You have a Bezier, which is a more rounded, curved type style of vectorization. And then you have Enhanced Corners, which allows you to set parameters on your own, or Enhanced Curves. And Enhanced Curves is basically a kind of a mixture between the Bezier and the Enhanced Corners, but has some predefined values for you. So we're just going to use the Bezier for this one on this case, and we're just going to hit OK. And the process is pretty simple, very basic. One thing you do need to remember, though, is that EnRoute is going to trace both sides of the line. So just kind of keep that in mind when you do trace something. And that will kind of help you kind of determine what's going on there. So now we've got a pretty good file. And as far as this, we zoom in and it didn't trace any of those artifacting pieces. So vectorizing a file can be pretty simple. But, what if we wanted to vectorize, different ways? So what we want to kind of go over here is, let's move this guy out of the way, bring this guy back into view. I'm going to click on the shortcut down here, which is over here by the make multiple copies, this corner. If I click on Enhanced Corners, if I have a file that's really pixelated and it's in really bad shape, what I can do is if I choose Enhanced Corners, I can tell the software how much permission I'm going to give the software to make changes to my file. So for example, on our top one here, the lower the tolerance I set it, the closer or the more closely it's going to follow these jagged edges. So if I bump this way down, it's going to follow those edges as much as possible. Noise, this is the perfect example of that artifacting that we're seeing there. The noise is kind of what eliminates that. It also reduces noise on the vector itself. So the more I push this way, the more it's going to remove. Think of it as permission. So you're giving the permission to software to make its changes. So it is going to make interpretive choices for you. And so the more you slide it to the right, the more permission it has to kind of do whatever it wants. So just do be aware, though, that the more you do slide it to the right, it actually will probably change your graphic a little bit. Maybe not on this file as much, but if you have other files a little more complex, it may make some more executive decisions you may not be okay with. So maxing everything out to the left like that or to the right is not always going to work in every circumstance. So let's try some different things here. And then the last one here is if we run into a corner like this, what do you want me to do with it? Would you rather me go ahead and make that a sharp corner, or would you rather that corner be rounded off? So let's bump that up a little bit. And vectorize again. Let's just kind of take a look here and see what some of the different things that it's done. So overall, it seems like it's done a pretty good job compared to this one. Let's look at a spot here specifically. Looks like in here, it looks like we had a little more rounded corners. So here we can see that the first time we did it, we've got a rounded edge here, not super sharp, kind of a weird line here. This corner is kind of rounded. But then when we go down here, these corners seem a little more defined. Now it did do this corner here, it wasn't able to correct fully. And that may just be because of the bitmap. If we look at the bitmap here, this is a pretty gnarly little spot. There's a lot of artifacting here that can kind of throw that off. And so that's probably what's going on there. So you may actually end up with a little mixture of both. And this is where I've told many people that use this vectorizing tool to try different settings. You may find that adjusting those several different times, you might get some better results. So go back and forth, change it, see how it comes out, see what you like, see what you don't like, and then kind of go from there. So here it looks like we did about the same. This didn't change much. So overall, though, either way, these two files are pretty decent. Like, I really wouldn't complain with these. And then I could just come back in here with my point editing tools and make really quick work of some of this stuff if we wanted to. But let's import another file and just take a look at what other kind of results we can get from some other stuff. So here's an interesting file, and this is going to be hard to see, but if I zoom in here, eventually, this is just something I drew. It's basically just, let's just say it's a drawing that I drew up, and it's just a doggy door and a door handle. It's real simple, but one thing to note about the way that the vectorizer works is that, remember that thing that I said about vectorizing on both sides of the line? That's going to be true here too. Even though these lines are very thin, it's still going to do that. But we're going to kind of take this. I'm just going to do the Bezier for now. Click OK. Let's get this guy out of the way. And so it has done a decent job of this. But remember how Bezier is kind of more of a rounded tool? I've got really rounded corners here. So this is probably not going to work out for me so well. I don't particularly like that. So let's get rid of it. If I'm going to vectorize something like this, I think I'm going to be more interested in either doing enhanced curves or enhanced corners. Let's see what enhanced curves does for us and see what kind of results we get. Still rounded corners. I'm not a fan of that. I would like these to be sharp corners. So again, no problem. We'll just delete it and kind of play with it. Most of the time, I'll admit that I like this option of the vectorize much better because it allows me to give me a little more fine-tuned control on the corners and things. There's not a whole lot of noise in here, so we can reduce that and see what we get here. So now we can see, now look at how that's done. That's so much better. So now I've got cornered over here, and I've got cornered edges down here and down in here. So this is perfect. Now the only thing that I have is this thing right here is a little bit weird, but unfortunately, if we look at my bitmap, it's pretty terrible. We'll zoom in here. This thing looks really weird. So unfortunately, there's not a whole lot I could do about this. This is pretty pixelated. So what I would probably end up doing in this case is finding out the dimensions of that, grabbing it, and just redrawing the circle. Easy enough to do an EnRoute, and so in this case, it doesn't really bother me too much. We'll leave it there, but remember now, we wanted this to be a straight line because this is going to be a door. So what I'm going to do is I can use my vectorizing tool in conjunction with some of our other tools, and we can actually get that center line. So for example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually take the distance. I'm going to measure this distance between these 2 points, just like that. And my segment length is 0.0139. So if I take that and I divide it by 2 so that I can get the center line, I come up with 0.00695. I'm going to exit the tool, and I'm going to actually just select the inside line. I'm going to come over to my offset. I'm going to say I want to make one outline, and I want to make it at 0.00695. It's going to be an outline, going to be square, apply, and boom. Just like that now, I use the vectorize tool, and I've got an exact center line to this piece. Now I can do the same thing with this guy right here. Outline, apply, And there, now I've got the center lines for my little object right there. So now I've got something that I can toolpath that's a single straight line. So using the vectorizing tool in conjunction with others is going to be kind of a key there. Don't always expect the vectorizing tool to do exactly to get it perfect. There's always going to be some modification that's required. It just depends on how much. On that butterfly, you know what? There's a lot of forgiveness there. Probably wouldn't have to make a whole lot of changes at all. You could probably vectorize it in 1 or 2 attempts and kind of get something that you like and go with it, and you'd be okay. One thing that I do want to do is I want to go back to that butterfly, and I want to go through couple of the other settings that are in there. So let's pull that back up again. And this is going to make a big difference when you vectorize things for your CNC machine. So when I vectorize, naturally, this thing is going to create a ton of points. So if I vectorize this and I select it and hit edit points, and I click on my artwork, well, in this case it didn't, but let's see if we can get it to create lots of points. Try the Bezier here, because this is going to be one of those things you'll run into quite a bit. Well, now that I'm trying to do it, it's not going to work. But figures. But what can happen is one thing to note about the vectorizing tool is it has a tendency, not always, but it has a tendency to create a lot of points. And I wish I would have saved my example that I had up earlier. But sometimes these arcs will just be loads of points. So what you can do, that's what this other setting is for when we go into vectorize, is the automatic cleanup. If I click on this option, I can tell the software to automatically clean up the artwork with, say, 0.001 or 0.002. We could go smaller on larger on this number, but I don't want it to change the graphic too much. I'm basically just saying, hey, if it doesn't change the graphic and you can remove that point, go ahead and get rid of it. So when I vectorize this will inherently reduce the amount of points. Before I do that, I need to get that out of the way so it doesn't do it on top of each other. Also, something to note is just an FYI, if you vectorize an object at the same time, it'll tend to put it right on top of each other. Be careful for duplicate lines. That'll pop up every once in a while. So let's just try this again with the automatic cleanup.
Box was covering those settings where it says that you're talking.
Oh, okay.
If you
Let's
can just
see
click
here.
the little arrow button to put it on the side.
Let's see here. Like this?
Yeah, if we can bring that over, that way they can see.
Okay.
See those. Thanks.
So we've got so that will help clean up some of the paths. Let's see it. Let's drag this a little bit over, and then we'll drag this a little bit over, and we'll do the vectorize again. We'll pull it in here. Let's do the same thing without it and see what we get between the two. Interesting. This one actually ended up with more points. Not sure why. But let's do this. Let's get a better example. The reason why we want to do reduce points on these files is if it does happen that it does create lines, what can happen is those adding excessive amounts of lines can cause problems with toolpathing. It can also cause problems with your output. So those are kind of two things that one of the most common errors we get with files that have been vectorized is that they'll get some weird errors on the machine when it comes to radiuses and all kinds of other things because the toolpath is trying to overlay a bunch of different stuff, and it's getting in there. And then when it goes past these areas that have hundreds of points, there can be little micro stutter steps inside the toolpath that can then get translated to your G code. And then that can throw errors on your machine and whatnot. So it's always a good practice to either A, vectorize with the automatic cleanup, or B, vectorize and then just do an automatic point cleanup separately. So one of the two, you can do it automatically or have it done by the software. So let's import I'm just going to import a colored drawing just to kind of show you what happens with a color drawing. So something like this, if we try and import this, we can still vectorize it, but what it'll do is it'll just vectorize the outside. That may be what you want, maybe that's not what you want, but just be aware if you try and do that. So what I'd need to do is convert this into black and white or into grayscale or something like that in order to get a better graphic on this one. Let's import a really complex file. I believe I have this one open already. I do. So here's an image, super complicated. There is a lot of stuff going on here that the software is going to have to work through. And so this is where using these tools here, the automatic cleanup, using the enhanced corners is going to really help you in more circumstances like this too, to kind of help get you better results. So I was playing around with this a little bit before we started our session today, and I was able to get this right here. So and this took a minute or two to vectorize. That's why we're not going to do it right here on the screen, but we have got lots of little detail in here. Now, the lower the resolution, obviously the more this is going to affect, and this is a pretty low resolution file, but we've done a pretty good job for this low resolution file. But there are literally hundreds of thousands of points in here. And so doing the point cleanup was able to speed up the process a little bit. And not only that, I would probably want to go in here and do it again a couple more times just to be safe. I can significantly reduce the point count by doing this multiple times, and it'll help clean that up. So it'll give me a little segment count each time. And now we're getting pretty close to it being as close as it can be, and so we'll just leave it at that. But when you vectorize, just do be aware that it can create a lot of points, and doing that cleanup option, which I don't know that we have that in the Flexi side or not, but it's really helpful for vectorizing stuff for the CNC. So pretty easy vectorizing in EnRoute. Just a few things there that's really kind of key to keep in mind is make sure it's a JPEG and a PNG. If you're playing around with the vectorize file, make sure that you have a black and white document or a grayscale. Like this one here is in a little bit of a grayscale, but that's okay. It was able to determine the different colors there. Just make sure that there's good contrast. That's one of the more important things. And we even say this when we do our Flexi webinars, is that good contrast is the key to a good vectorize. So if you need to, there may be some times where if you have to take it into Paint or If you were, let's say, you know what's notorious for really creating bad vectorizing files is when you vectorize a piece or when you scan a piece of paper with a logo on it. You know how paper has like little fibrous materials in it? That really bright, intense light of a scanner can pick up those little micro flakes of paper and stuff like that and reflect light. And so you get tons of weird little artifacting everywhere. Sometimes just going into Paint and erasing some of those little things in some spots might even be a good idea before you bring it in. If EnRoute's having a really hard time with that. Another thing is that if it vectorizes those little pieces, you can always just delete them too. I can go in here and delete any one of these little pieces in here if that's necessary. I can ungroup and just start selecting little pieces that I don't want and just remove them if I had to. Now with this file, this is a little overboard, but kind of get the point there. So making sure that those files are kind of clean when they come in. Get as best a resolution as you can, but it doesn't necessarily need to be. It just means that if you do, you're going to get a more generic shape, and you might have to massage it a little bit with your point editing tools later. Then adjust those settings. Crank some of those up and down. Try different options. Try, making sharper corners or less sharp corners. You might get some different or better results. And actually, don't even be afraid to combine multiple vector arts together. I was mentioning this in another customer session that if you have to vectorize with 3 or 4 different settings and then combine several pieces together, hey, that's perfectly acceptable. That works too. You may get different results on different parts of the file and then want to combine those together. So that's also a great tip to try. And then just use those point cleanups if you can. Anything that's vectorized is going to have a lot of points. Try and use the point cleanup. That'll save you a lot of headache later on down the road when you're toolpathing and sending your files to the machine. It'll not only reduce the amount of time it takes to toolpath, it'll also reduce the amount of time that it takes to output the file, and then it's going to reduce the amount of errors on your machine down the road. So use those point cleanup tools, whether you do it inside the vectorizer or afterwards. Definitely a recommendation to do that. So that's vectorizing in a nutshell. Do you guys have any questions or any thoughts?
Bottom right there.
You know what? Sometimes, Scott, you're saying it doesn't work right all the time. Sometimes what can happen is I've run into things that one of the things to note is when you're getting images off of Google, sometimes the vectorizer can actually fail. One of the things that you might do is, for example, this JPEG that I used. Here's another one I have sitting here laying on the desktop. I'm gonna right click on the file and go to Properties. And one of the things to uncheck is this thing here. So if you go right click on the JPEG or the bitmap and you go to Properties, check that it's not hit to read only, or that this is unchecked. Because if the file is locked or something like that, that can cause the vectorizer to fail. It'll cause a crash on the vectorizer if it runs into an issue like that. So just be aware that if you are downloading an image off the internet or something like that, it might be a good idea just to check the file if it's crashing, because that can be a thing where files from the internet are locked.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, let's see. Scott said, is there a way when you create a drawing, say of a word, and toolpath it, to remove the toolpath on a single letter, say, so that you can modify that letter only and then re-toolpath?
Let's see here. Well, I want to say that if you toolpath the items together, so I'm going to create some text here. And I'm going to ungroup it so that I can select each one individually. I'm going to do just a simple routing offset with a small bit. If I toolpath those objects separately, so the key was when I typed up my text, there's several actions that you kind of have to do. So you type your text first, and when object, like when you have text that's not converted to outlines yet, it's purple. So that's the first thing I'm going to do is convert it to lines and arcs. But when I select it, it's still a group because technically it always groups text together because it assumes that you want the text to be together. So the first thing you want to do then after converting it to lines and arcs is just hit Control U or go over to this tool and hit the ungroup, or you can go to transform and ungroup. Now that makes it each an individual part. So now those are all individuals so that when I toolpath them like I did here, I can now select this E separately and I can remove the toolpath and delete it. Now, where this does not apply is let's do another sample here. So I'm going to do the same steps and convert it to lines and arcs. I'm going to ungroup this. Now, the only difference here is that when I do it here, I'm going to get the same results, but the O and the R, or the O, the center part of the O is technically part of that letter because when it toolpathed it, see how when I select the object, that object is red? So it recognizes that as a hole inside of the outer part. And so because I toolpathed these two items, since they were toolpathed at the same time, these two objects are now permanently bound together. I cannot ungroup them or do anything to remove that center piece because it's bound to it. So just something to remember, usually the centers of objects like that will be grouped together because when they were toolpath, that inner toolpath was dependent on the selection that you made. But with text and things you can separate, you just have to make sure and ungroup it and make sure it's completely separate beforehand. Because if I toolpath this, when it's grouped, if I group it and then toolpath it, if I go back later, oh, I guess it does. Sometimes it doesn't though, and that's where it can be tricky is sometimes if you have it grouped together and you toolpath it, sometimes it won't. So it's always best to make sure you have it ungrouped before you toolpath so that they're technically separate later on down the line. But so for example, in here, if I right click on this object and edit this toolpath, it's going to affect the inside and the outside. And that's kind of permanently that way. So hopefully that answers the question or helps out a little bit. If it,
Okay.
if it, if you have another circumstance that might be helpful, give us a call and I'd love to maybe take a look at it. We could see if there's something else that might help.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. Okay, I think you covered it all pretty thoroughly, but if anyone else has any questions they'd like to go over with EnRoute, go ahead and type them in. Otherwise, I think we'll close it up for today.
One
So yeah, go for it, Aaron.
I was gonna say one other little thing that I wanted to mention, since no other questions here, real quick, is just do be aware that our new training program has been launched since the trade show last month. So if you guys are interested in one-on-one training, that is available. We offer it, and you can purchase 2 or 4 hour blocks if you'd like to do that. All you have to do is give us a call at our customer service or our sales department, and they can get you set up with that. And essentially what that gives you is if you buy the 2 hour block, we would set up 2 sessions, 1 hour each session, and then we talk about whatever you want to talk about. So if you have a job that you're having trouble with, or if there's a topic like ATP or nesting or toolpathing or drilling or something that you need some more help with, 3D, whatever that might be, we could go over that topic and we record that session, and I send you the recording so that you can download and have it forever. So just be aware that that's available, and if you're interested in something like that, some more one-on-one training, we could set that up, and yep, and that's the link right there, that thinksai.com/training. So that's the place where you can check out the pricing and request more information if you'd like.
Excellent. And just as a reminder, we are recording this webinar, so we'll post that up on our YouTube channel, and we will send everyone a link. So if you want to go back and review it or share it with anyone else, you'll have the link to do so. And we will be hosting our last webinar of 2019 on December 17th. So it'll be at the same time, 10 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. And we'll be covering taking advantage of using snaps in EnRoute. So once again, that'll be on December 17th. And hey, it looks like we have one more question. We can go ahead and answer that if you can, Aaron. Scott said, if you ungroup, then Toolpath, and regroup after Toolpath, can you separate them later?
Yes, you should be able to separate them, yeah. As long as they were ungrouped before you toolpath, then if you regroup them, then you should be able to separate them again later.
Okay, to remove individual toolpaths?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. All right.
You know, Derek, good question. Any mouse with a 2-button and a scroll wheel is usually pretty good. Um, if you email, or if you call or email us at our technical support, we actually have a little document that we could send you that actually has all the key bindings and the mouse clicks in EnRoute. So if you're not familiar with those, they're also available in the software, but there's a nice little graphic that kind of shows all the key bindings on a keyboard layout, and then on a mouse that shows you what for zooming, panning, moving back and forth. It's really useful. So if you send us an email at our eSupport, or give us a call, we've got that document we can send to you if you want something like that. It's a pretty good little tool.
Excellent. Okay, Derek says thanks. All right, then I guess we'll close it up for today. Thank you so much, Aaron, and thank you everyone for attending. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to learn a little bit more about EnRoute, and we will talk to you folks next month.
Sounds good. Bye.
Bye.